Let's look to Psalm 25 and verses 1 through 22. Let me read it to you tonight, and then we'll talk about it just for a little bit. But I want you to kind of dovetail off this tonight and what he goes on to say in a very wonderful way. David now has lost his kingdom. I want you to share that with you. David has lost his kingdom. And I think the most important thing I could tell you was that he had blown it as a dad. He had not disciplined Absalom at all when Absalom murdered his own son, because David never, dealt with the rape of one of his boys raping his daughter. So because David never did that, Absalom hated David and absolutely despised David. David had a great love for Absalom. No matter what happened, when he was killed, he just wept and wept for Absalom because he lost him. Well, now Absalom comes in and takes over the kingdom. The power can always come, but God's presence is not always here. So I'd rather be in God's presence than have the power. That is probably the most incredible thing you could ever learn in your life. You see, God can give back the power, and God can give back the position, but not if you don't give God everything up. So between power and position, God's presence is most important. If you choose to put God's presence out and the power position before, you're going to lose. David knew that he had blown it. And I have to say that when I left Calvary Chapel, Cyprus, when I was a senior pastor, I absolutely knew in my heart if I made a mistake, it was okay. And the reason why was because if I had made a mistake and left by accident, God would see the humility and give it back. But if I stayed and it was too long to stay and I wasn't being obedient, then I would not only lose that, but I believe the future ministry of the Lord. So if you have a choice in your life to go after the presence of God or the power of God, would you please go after the presence of God? Because the presence of God is the power of God. That's the greatest lesson I think I could ever teach you, that don't worry about your position. Don't worry about the power. If you have Jesus Christ in your heart, you have everything that goes with it. But God might be testing you. If you will humble yourself, then God will what? Tell me, exalt you. If you exalt yourself, God is what? I know you don't believe this, going to humble you. Can we do that one more time? Because it kind of feels like you don't know the Bible. If you humble yourself, God is what? Going to exalt you. If you exalt yourself, God is what? Going to humble you. So you have two options in life. Either you fall on the rock or the rock falls on you. So which way would you like it to be? Well, Steve, we're going to die. Oh, you're going to die. One, you're going to be broken. The second, you're going to perish. It'd be much better for you to fall on Christ than for Christ to fall on you. So those are little decisions that make major changes down the road. That's why you ought never to fight for a position or worry about your future. You will always be in God's perfect will if you're listening to the voice of the Spirit. And so in chapter 25, he says, "Unto thee, O Lord." Now David is walked out of his kingdom. He's broken. He's devastated. The background is so important. You can pick it up in Samuel, I think, chapter 22. But just picture David kind of barefoot, broken, ashes, humble, and he's walking out of everything he's built, and he's humbled and broken and devastated. "Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul." Right there it convicts me, because I get mad or something goes on. "But Lord, I lift up my soul to you. O my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed. Let not my enemies triumph over me. Yea, let none that wait on thee be ashamed. Let none that them be ashamed which transgress without cause. Show me thy ways, O Lord. Teach me thy path. Lead me in thy truth, and teach me, for thou art the God of my salvation. On thee do I wait all day. Remember, O Lord, thy tender mercy and thy loving kindness, for they have been ever of old. Remember not the sins of my youth, nor the transgressions according to mercy. Remember thou me for thy goodness' sake, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore will he teach sinners in the way. The meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach in his way. All the path of the Lord are mercy and truth, unto such as keep his commandment and his testimonies. For thy name's sake, O Lord, pardon my iniquity, for it is great. What man is he that feareth the Lord? Him shall he teach in the way that he shall choose. His soul shall dwell at ease, and his seed shall inherit the earth. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. My eyes are ever towards the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net. Turn thee unto me, have mercy upon me, for I am desolate and afflicted. The trouble of my heart are enlarged. O bring thou me out of distress. Look upon me, God. This is Pastor Steve. I'm afflicted, and my pain, and forgive me of all my sins. Consider my enemy, for they are many, and they hate me with a cruel hate. O keep my soul and deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I put my trust in thee. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait on thee. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all his trouble. And so it's a prayer that you don't expect from a broken king. It's a prayer that you never ever dreamed that someone could have when they're walking away from something that's theirs, that's been taken not in the right way. It's not a prayer that we would ever pray. We'd be on the phone talking to each other and explaining how we are vindicated and why this is so wrong. And we'd go public and we'd call press and everything else. David doesn't do that. He does three things that are so profound in my life. In verses 1 through 7, David is going to teach us his absolute dependency in the Lord. What does it mean to be dependent upon God? It means that you can worship God, you can pray to God, you can lift your hands when things are going bad in your life. In verses 8 through 14, David's declaration of the Lord. He begins to tell you how great God is, how the loving kindness was in his life, and the grace and the mercy when everything was falling apart in his life. And then in verses 15 through 22, David's deliverance from the Lord. You see, three things kind of stand out. Number one, David looked to the Lord. David looked in the Lord, and then David looked from the Lord. No matter what he did in his life, it was always about the Lord. And so David's dependency in verse 1 through 7, he starts with a prayer. And then we're going to see halfway through, he begins to continue, or he pauses in prayer. And at the very end, he ends in prayer. But his whole life is just in this prayer. That's all he had to say. He really couldn't talk to Joab. He really couldn't really defend himself. But this is how the man prayed. And this is the desire in the heart of my life. And I don't know if I'm doing it right, but my heart is for you to come and learn how to pray for your children, how to pray for yourself when things are so bad, how not to call us, but to call God first. And then in your life, you're going to ask God these three things. You're going to ask God for great dependence upon him. You're not going to look to each other. And secondly, you're going to make a great declaration how great God is, even though you feel you've been hurt by God. And lastly, you're going to ask God to deliver you and show you how wonderful he is. So David, in verses 1 through 7, he starts off with prayer, Lord, protect me, in verses 1 through 3. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. And then in verse 3, yea, let none that wait on thee be ashamed. And so what is he saying? Notice, let me not be ashamed. You see, David is asking because he was very shamed. He was confounded. He didn't know what to think. Let me not be turned over to my enemies. Let them not triumph right now. Probably he was saying, God, don't even let my son be dealt with. Whatever it takes, deal with me. And then let none that wait on you be ashamed. God, please, when we learn to wait, would you bless us? Would you teach us the importance of waiting? Would you give us the discounts and everything else? We don't ask anything, but if we wait on you, if we ask you, then God, you're going to honor us. Because you said every single time, if you will wait on me, you'll be able to mount up the wings of eagles and fly. You'll be able to run and not faint, and walk and not stumble, and let them be ashamed who come after me. So even the things I feel against people, God, turn them towards you. So, and then verse 4 and 5, he says here 3 things. Lord, guide me. So not only, Lord, protect me, but Lord, as I walk out of my kingdom, guide me. I have no money, I have no authority, I have no food, and we know that because David took the sword of Goliath, and he had to go inside the temple to get food to live on. And because of that, 80 priests were killed. In verse 4, show me thy ways. And then in verse 5, teach me. So, Lord, show me and teach me. Yes, I'm the king, but at this moment, I don't feel very good. My decisions have been bad. And so he was waiting to be led. You hear what I said? He was waiting to be led. He was willing in verse 5 to be led. And then in verse 6, again, God forgive me. So 3 things happen in verses 1 through 7. It says in verses 1 through 3, protect me. I'm walking out of my kingdom. Then in verses 4 and 5, Lord, guide me. I have no idea where I'm going to go. And then in verses 6 and 7, Lord, forgive me. Forgive me. That is the most wonderful thing you could ever pray. God, I'm not fighting you. I'm walking out. I'm going to trust you. But I got to tell you, I'm scared to death. We have no future apart from you. We have nowhere to go, nothing to help us. We have no money. What we're doing is absolutely crazy, God, and I know it's part of your judgment upon my life. I have not been gracious. I have taken advantage. I have put you in an awkward position. I've turned the people against you and had them now look to Absalom because I did not speak. I thought this would go away. It didn't go away. And because my son was out there, he had the ears of people when I could have stood up, and I didn't because I didn't know what to do. I was so ashamed. But now I've shamed you in my foolishness. So now David comes back. God, I'm willing to walk out in humility, but I have to say to you, I need help. I need you to guide me. I need you to forgive me. Notice verse 6 and 7. Lord, remember your mercy in verse 6. Remember, O Lord, thy tender mercy and thy loving kindness. Then in verse 7, Lord, remember not my sin. Remember no more the sins of my youth. God, can we start over? And so David walks out with Joab and some great men. And those were the mighty men of God that David taught. You remember one guy could kill, it was 800 men. So 3 guys could kill 240 men at a time. He had 3 guys walking down the mall, no problem. They could shoot with their left hand, they could shoot with their right hand. He said, all you that are in debt, all you that are distressed, and all you that are discouraged, come to me. I'll make you part of my army. Why? Because he was in debt, he was discouraged, and he was disappointed. So he took a bunch of people just like him, and he taught them how, once again, to look to God. That's what I want to do tonight. Just teach you how to do that. Number 2, David's declaration, verse 8 through 14. He pauses in prayer for a second. And David says here, God, I need the right priority in my life. Look at verse 8 and 9. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore will he teach sinners his way. The meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his ways. Lord, you always have your priorities. I've messed up because I didn't listen to your word. Your word teaches me. If I would have looked to you, I would have never done this. And not only the priorities in verse 8 and 9, look at the principles in verses 10 through 11. I have to have the right principles. In verse 10, all the path of the Lord are mercy and true, unto such that keep his commandment. For thy name's sake, O Lord, pardon my iniquity. So, Lord, I want to be led, but I need to be consecrated in verse 10. And God, I want to be led, but I need to be confessing in verse 11. So not only do I need the right principles, but I also need the right priority in life. My priority is not right. My principles are not godly. And then he says, thirdly, David had the right person. Look at verse 12 and 14. What man is he that fears the Lord? Him shall he teach the way that he shall choose. His soul shall dwell at ease. His seed shall inherit the earth. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. Who's the person? Jesus Christ. He just offended. He just lost his kingdom. Now, who's he going to? God. He's going to the one person that could help him. You remember Belshazzar? He was drunk. And now, the very voice that cursed was the only voice that could help him. And he had just got done cursing the God of heaven. That's a bad thing. When all of a sudden God says, I hold your breath in my hand, and you just curse me, you're out of here. David, understanding what he did, said, God, would you please once again hear the declaration? I acknowledge that you are right and I'm wrong. I acknowledge with all my heart I need to be walking because I have not been righteous. And even though Absalom has taken it wrong, I am doing what's right because you have always been right. If you didn't want Absalom, he would have not come. So I have to believe this is part of your will. So I'm willing to walk out. You say, you mean he's not going to fight? What's he going to fight? What's he going to do? Is he going to raise up people and come against them and have more people killed because his foolishness? No, this is a great man. This is why God said he has a heart after my heart. Not because he did everything right, but because he understood when to quit and he understood when to come back. Those are two important things that he never got upset with God. He questioned, why art thou, disquieted? Why are you so far from helping me? It was his sin. But he was on the Philistine side. And then all of a sudden, God says, now the men around you are going to kill you. And David says, well, I'm going to encourage myself in the Lord. God, if you kill me, how can I be a king? So can I get back on Israel's side? He was able to talk to God. He had a decent conversation, just like you. So prayer is not, thus saith the Lord. I think sometimes God says, what did you say? Prayer is help. Peter cried, help. That's it. That's a prayer. Or David cried, God, I'm afraid. That's a prayer. Or David cried out, I don't know what to do, but no, don't touch him. In fact, we're not going to touch anybody. We're going to humble ourselves because if I ever have a chance to come back, God is through you. It's not getting my things together, it's through you. And so sometimes we lose it because we're trying to do it. Then we think we can earn our way back because we can do it. What are you doing wrong every single time? You are dependent upon yourself. So when you blow it, what are you going to do? I'm going to make it right. Please don't. That's why you blew it, because you thought you could do it. Now you think you can get right with God? How about you just give up? I can't do that. I'm a really good person. I don't care about that. I think the Bible tells you you're sinful and wicked. You have a deceitful heart. But you might think you're okay. But God says all of us are just terrible apart from him. And so he has taken all of our sins and laid them on Jesus Christ. So because of Christ, I'd rather be next to Jesus than next to power. Well, what about the position? Forget the position. Position and power can come anytime. What about my respect? Who cares about your respect? You've lost your respect. You haven't lost your character yet. Be careful, David. And then lastly, he says, David cries out, not only, Lord, I'm going to declare you're right. Lastly, I'm not going to stay there. And that's why I see people, they stay. But I am going to ask you to deliver me. Because I believe that you give people a second chance. He says here in verses 15 through 22, he ends with prayer, Lord, deliver me from the snare. Verse 15, my eyes are ever towards the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net. Remember the web? It's called the net. Maybe you're caught in pornography. He'll pluck your feet out of the net, the web. And then in verse 16, deliver me from this affliction. Turn thee unto me and have mercy upon me, for I am desolate and afflicted. God, I am so messed up in my mind. I don't know how I feel anymore. And then in verse 17, Lord, deliver me from trouble. The trouble of my heart is enlarged. Oh, bring thou me out of my distress. God, you got to soften my heart. And then verse 18, Lord, deliver me from this pain. Look upon my affliction and my pain, and God, would you forgive my sins? So God, look upon my affliction. Look upon the pain in my life, and God, forgive me for griping and complaining so much. And then in verse 19, Lord, deliver me from the enemy. Consider my enemy, for there are many, and they hate me with a cruel hate. In verse 20, let me not be ashamed, God. Oh, keep my soul and deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I put my trust in you. Joab, what are you doing, David? We're walking out. Why, David? We can fight. No, we can't. Well, why is Simeon cursing you? How do I know that God didn't send him? You know, Joab, the answer is not always fighting. The answer is always trusting God. How do you know that we're not here because we did this in the flesh? Verse 21, let integrity preserve me. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait on you, Lord. It's hard to wait. And lastly, let Israel be redeemed. Verse 20, God, don't deal with my son. Don't deal with me. But God, for your name's sake, I have messed up Israel. The people are divided between two leaders. Would you forgive me for doing that? Would you help them not to trust in Absalom or not to trust in me? But God, I blew it because I put the glory on me and not you. There was a time Elijah was going to call down fire, remember? He poured water, poured water, poured water. He says, Lord, I am thy servant. Let me avenge my name. And there was no answer. And then Elijah says, Lord, let me honor your name today. Bam, fire came down. You get the point? David walked out, not defending himself, but honoring the name of your God. So when I come to that point in my life, that if I'm sick or feeble or mad or upset or things aren't fair, who's the one that makes things fair? Who's the one that can bring prosperity? Who's the one that can feed me when I'm empty? And who's the one that can put my feet upon the rock? It's Jesus Christ. So he is our hero. So he delivers. He's able to be declared, and we just love him. And whatever comes our way, either I deserve it or God is going to use me to humble me to whip the enemy by trusting God. So God, if you want to humble me so you can take out Satan, go for it. If you want to humble me so I'm broken, so you go to the hospital and get operations, go for it. I had 3 people today say, because of you, I can go get this operation. Thanks, God. I got the point. And so there are 3 major operations, all because they see an endurance in my life. Well, I don't have much of a choice, do I? I can say goodbye to you guys and be gone, but I don't want that unless God wants it. So here is how I believe. Whatever comes my way, you have and given the permission. I don't accept it right, that's my problem, and I'm willing to change. But in this church, we're not going to defend our position. We're not going to honor man. We're going to honor Jesus Christ. And we're not going to fight for a position, or we're not going to get the power. What we want on Sunday night and every night of the week is we want the sweet presence of Jesus Christ. So in the car, he's loving you. In bed, he's loving you. When you're throwing rocks at him, he's loving you. This love of God is the only thing that can melt your heart. It's the love of God that constrains you to walk a second mile.